The battlefield was silent now, but the silence was heavy. Smoke curled above broken stone walls, and the ground was wet with old blood. She stood in the middle, her hands gripping the ancient spear that had never failed her. Her enemies had fallen, yet her heart was not calm. She was known across the stars as a warrior queen, fierce and merciless. Her spear was feared in every world, its silver blade shining even in the darkest night. But tonight the blade trembled. It shook not from her weakness, but from something else, something she could not understand. She heard footsteps behind her, slow and steady. Her soldiers were dead. No one should be alive in this ruined field. Her breath grew heavy, and her grip on the spear tightened. She turned sharply, ready to strike. There he was, a man standing in the shadows of smoke and fire. His eyes burned with a light she had not seen in years, and his lips moved with words that froze her blood. He whispered her forgotten name, not her title, not the name the galaxy feared, but the name she had buried deep in her soul. It was a name she had not heard since her youth, since before war had stolen her softness. The spear trembled harder, shaking as if it recognized the sound. Her chest tightened, her knees weakened, memories rushed back like fire. She remembered the day she had held him in her arms, his blood pouring over her hands. She remembered the last breath he took, the way his eyes closed. She remembered digging his grave with her own hands, burying him under cold earth. And yet, he was here, standing alive before her. Her lips shook as she spoke. "I buried you myself," she said, her voice breaking. Her spear nearly slipped from her grip, but she forced herself to stand tall, her warrior mask trying to return. The man took one step forward, his boots pressed into the blood-soaked ground, and still, he looked at her with those familiar eyes. The air around them grew heavy, the wind howled through broken towers, and still, her spear would not stay still. She could not decide what frightened her more, the man who should not exist, or the weapon in her hand that seemed to tremble with its own fear. The spear had never betrayed her, never failed, never shaken. But now it trembled as if alive, as if the whisper of her forgotten name had broken some ancient seal. Her soldiers had told legends. They spoke of humans who carried strange power. They said humans could touch the deepest part of a soul with only words. She had laughed at those stories once. But now, as she stared at this man, she was not laughing. Her mind screamed to kill him, to thrust the spear forward and end the nightmare. But her heart whispered something else. Her heart told her the impossible was standing right in front of her. She took a step back. Her spear pointed at him, but her hands were not steady. Her eyes searched his face for lies. But all she saw was truth. The truth of the man she had once loved, the man she had buried. The ground beneath them shook slightly. A warning, a reminder that the war around them was not finished. But she could not move. Her body was trapped between rage and longing, between fear and hope. He spoke again, softly, his voice like a storm whispering through her heart. "You never truly buried me," he said. Her breath caught in her chest. The spear rattled as if it would shatter in her hands. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but her throat locked. Tears burned her eyes, though she hated herself for it. She was a warrior queen, feared across the galaxy. But in this moment, she was nothing more than a broken woman facing a ghost. The man stepped closer. The world around them blurred. The smoke, the ruins, the blood, they all faded as his eyes locked with hers. She saw pain in him, but also something else. Something alive, something dangerous, something human. The spear shook once more. It hummed as though it remembered him too. The weapon that never bent now felt weak. And for the first time in years, so did she. Her voice broke again. "I saw you die in my arms," she whispered. Her words carried fear, anger, and sorrow all at once. The man gave no answer, only silence, and silence was worse than any lie. The ruins groaned as the wind screamed through broken steel. The battlefield seemed to hold its breath. Every shadow, every stone, every memory was watching, waiting for what would come next. Her spear trembled in her hands. Her heart trembled inside her chest, and her soul trembled with a truth she could not yet face. He had whispered her forgotten name, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. The battlefield around them was still burning, but she no longer heard the flames. Her heart beat too loudly, drowning out everything else. The man before her was real, not a shadow, not a dream. And yet he could not be real. She had buried him with her own hands. She had marked the grave with stone. She had walked away with blood on her soul. The man looked at her with eyes that once promised loyalty, eyes that once looked at her with fire. Now they were deeper, darker, carrying something she did not understand. He was not only alive, he was changed by something more than life or death. Her spear shook again, the ancient weapon humming like a living thing. The galaxy knew her as unbreakable, her spear as unstoppable. But both were trembling now, as if they shared the same fear. She forced herself to speak, her voice sharp but weak under its edge. "What are you?" she asked, her breath heavy. "What have you become?" The man stepped closer, his movements calm but heavy with power. "I am what you made me," he said, his tone soft yet cutting through her like steel. Her throat tightened, rage and sorrow fighting inside her. "I buried you," she shouted, the words breaking in the smoke. He nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving hers. "You did," he whispered, "and still I stand." Her grip on the spear tightened until her knuckles whitened. The weapon hummed louder, vibrating against her skin. It was as if the spear itself remembered him, as if it had once tasted his blood. Her chest burned, her body wanted to strike, to end this haunting, but her soul hesitated, and hesitation was something she had never known. Memories returned like knives. His laughter, his touch, his last words as life left his body. She had sworn never to remember, never to feel, but his voice ripped those walls apart. Her forgotten name echoed in her mind again, a name that belonged not to the warrior queen, but to the woman she once was. The silence between them grew dangerous. It was not empty silence, but heavy with words unsaid. Every second felt like a blade pressing closer to her throat. Finally, she spoke again, her voice trembling. "Why return now? Why walk among the living when the grave already claimed you?" The man tilted his head, his expression unreadable. "Because you never let me rest," he said, his words slow and certain. Her breath caught, confusion twisting her thoughts. "What do you mean?" she demanded. He raised his hand, not in threat, but in proof. The air around him shimmered faintly, like heat rising from stone. "I am bound," he whispered, "not by death, not by earth, but by you." Her spear nearly slipped from her hands. "Bound by her." The words echoed like thunder in her chest. It made no sense, and yet it explained everything. The way the spear trembled, the way her heart broke when she saw him, the way his whisper had shattered her armor. The warrior queen, feared across galaxies, stepped back in disbelief. Her mask of steel cracked, and her eyes burned with tears she had buried for years. She had faced monsters, armies, and empires without fear. But this ghost, this man she once loved, broke her in a way no blade could. Still, she was not ready to surrender. She raised the spear again, though her arms shook. "If you are bound by me," she hissed, "then I will cut the bond now." The man did not flinch, did not even raise his hand to stop her. Instead, he whispered her name again, her true name. The sound struck her heart like lightning. The spear froze midair, its silver blade refusing to move. Her breath came in gasps, her strength draining. She felt as if the galaxy itself had turned against her will. Her spear, her weapon, her life, it no longer obeyed. The man's voice, the man's presence, had broken its command. Terror filled her veins. She had built her empire on the strength of that weapon. She had built her name on its power. Now it trembled like a child, and she trembled with it. The man stepped even closer, now only a breath away. His eyes were storms, full of grief and fire. "You thought you buried me," he said, "but you buried yourself." Her lips parted, but no words came. Her mind was war. Her soul was breaking. For the first time in her life, she did not know what was real. The battlefield around her was nothing compared to the battlefield inside her. She had faced death without blinking, but she could not face him. Not this man, not this ghost, not the warrior she once called hers. And as the spear trembled in her hands, she knew the war she feared most was only beginning. The spear had never failed her. It was forged in fire older than the stars, blessed by voices that spoke only in war. For years, it was her strength, her crown, her proof that she was chosen above all others. But now, in the ruins of battle, the weapon trembled in her grip, refusing to obey. The man before her did nothing but speak her name. His voice was soft, human, fragile even, yet the ancient weapon shook as if the universe itself bent under that sound. She clenched her jaw, fighting the weakness creeping in her body. "Stop this," she whispered, though the plea sounded more like a cry than a command. He only looked at her, calm, yet full of fire. "You don't understand," he said. "The spear remembers me." Her breath caught. Rage burned through her chest. "It remembers death," she spat. I buried you with my own hands." But deep inside, something colder whispered that he might be right. Legends stirred in her memory. Old voices she once ignored. Priests who warned her that the spear was not only metal. They said it carried a soul, a bond between warrior and fate. It could not be stolen, only chosen. And now it seemed the weapon had chosen again, trembling in her hands like a prisoner begging to be free. She tightened her grip, but the spear's vibration grew stronger. It hummed until the sound filled the battlefield, until broken stone rattled around them. The air itself quivered, as if the spear's heart was calling something greater. She gritted her teeth, shouting above the hum, "It belongs to me." The man shook his head slowly. "It never belonged to you," he said, his eyes sharp as blades. "You only carried it, but the spear remembers who it truly serves." His words sliced through her, cutting deeper than any wound. For the first time in her reign, she felt like a thief. Like all her victories had been borrowed from a weapon that was never truly hers. "No," she growled, raising the blade high. The weapon screamed in her hands, sparks of light running along its edge. It shook so violently she could hardly control it, and in her rage, she pointed the trembling blade at him. "If the spear remembers you, then it will kill you again." The man did not flinch. Instead, he stepped closer, closing the space between them. The silver light of the spear glowed against his chest, but the weapon did not strike. It held still, shaking like a storm trapped in chains. She gasped in horror. Her body wanted to kill him, but the spear refused. It was rebelling against her will. It was alive, and it was no longer hers. Her knees weakened, the truth pressing down heavier than any army. She had not only lost control of her weapon, she had lost control of herself. The man's whisper had broken something inside her, and now the spear trembled like a voice of fate, declaring she was no longer chosen. The battlefield moaned with the weight of silence. Broken towers leaned, fire cracked, and yet nothing dared interrupt them. Her soldiers would never believe it if they saw it. The queen, the killer of kings, standing powerless before a ghost, and a weapon shaking like a child in her hands. The man lifted his hand slowly, not to strike, but to touch. His fingers brushed the trembling shaft of the spear. The weapon glowed brighter, its vibration rising like a scream. She gasped as fire raced through her veins. Her mind filled with voices, echoes of warriors long gone. The spear was speaking, and she could not shut it out. Visions burned in her eyes. She saw battles before her time, faces of warriors she had never known. She saw the man standing among them, holding the spear as if it had always been his. Her heart nearly stopped. The spear was showing her the truth. The weapon had never chosen her. It had only waited. Waited for him. No, she whispered, her voice breaking like shattered glass. The man's gaze burned into her, steady, unshaken. You feel it too, he said. The bond was never yours. Her chest shook, her pride cracked. Everything she believed in, every empire she built, now rested on a lie. The spear shook violently, slipping in her hands. Her strength could not hold it. Her will could not command it. It wanted him, the man who whispered her forgotten name, the man who rose from the grave she made, the man she could not kill. She staggered back, her voice breaking in fury. You are nothing but a ghost, she cried. But even as she spoke, she knew it was false. The spear's trembling betrayed her words. It remembered him. It obeyed him. And with every breath, she feared that soon, so would she. The spear trembled so violently that it nearly tore from her grip. She had never lost control of it, never once in all her battles. It had been her crown, her weapon, her proof of destiny. But now it shook like a living thing, reaching not for her, but for him. And she knew in her heart that something greater than war was breaking before her eyes. The man stood calm, his presence heavy as stone. Every word he spoke carried power, but it was not his strength that broke her. It was the truth. The spear obeyed him, not her. Her empire had been built on a weapon that was never truly hers. Her mind burned with rage, but beneath it was fear. She remembered the oath she had sworn long ago, the oath she had spoken before her people, before her gods, that she would be the spear's eternal master, that she alone was chosen. Now, that oath crumbled like dust. She wanted to deny it, to shout that she was still queen, but the weapon in her hands betrayed her voice. Its trembling grew worse each time he whispered her name, that cursed name she had buried with him, that name that stripped her of power, leaving only the woman she once was. Her eyes narrowed, her heart shaking. You betrayed me, she hissed, though she knew the words were hollow. You should have stayed in the grave. The man only shook his head, his gaze sharp but sad. I never betrayed you, he said softly. You betrayed yourself. The words struck deeper than any blade. She felt her chest ache, the past rising like a storm. She remembered the night of blood, the night she had chosen war over love. She remembered his last breath in her arms, and how she had sworn to never look back. But now, here he stood, alive, and every broken promise returned to her. The ground beneath them groaned, stones cracking under invisible weight. The spear glowed brighter, its hum louder than thunder. It was reacting not only to him, but to their history, the bond between them, forged in life and broken in death, now roared back to life. Her voice shook, torn between anger and sorrow. I swore I would never bow to anyone, she cried. I swore I would never be weak again. The man stepped closer, his eyes locked to hers. And yet here you are, he whispered, weaker than you have ever been. Her hand shook, the spear trembling against her chest. She wanted to thrust it through him to end this nightmare. But the weapon refused, her body refused. It was as if the universe itself rejected her will. And in that moment, she realized her oath had already been broken. The battlefield around them grew colder. The fires dimmed, shadows lengthened. Even the wind seemed to pause. It was as if the galaxy itself was listening to their war of words. Her breath grew heavy, tears she had buried for years pressing against her eyes. You don't understand what I lost, she whispered. I buried you because I had no choice. The man's jaw tightened, pain flashing across his face. You had a choice, he said, his voice like a blade. You chose power over me. Her chest burned with shame and fury. She wanted to deny it, to scream that he was wrong. But the truth cut too deep. She had chosen power. She had chosen the spear. And in choosing it, she had lost him. Now the spear trembled as if mocking her. The weapon she sacrificed everything for no longer obeyed her. It answered him, the man she had buried, the man she had betrayed. She felt her knees, the weight of it all pressing her down. The warrior queen, who never bowed, now bowed to the truth. The man stepped closer, the glow of the spear casting silver light across his face. "You swore an oath," he said quietly, "and you broke at the moment you chose war over love." Her tears finally fell, burning trails down her face. She hated herself for it, hated him for bringing her to this. But more than anything, she hated the truth. For no weapon, no crown, no empire could hide it anymore. The spear shook one last time and then stilled. It was quiet now, its glow soft, but she knew it was no longer hers. The bond was gone, broken like her oath. Her hands trembled, her soul trembled, and for the first time, she realized she was truly alone. The man looked at her, not with victory, not with cruelty, but with sorrow, and that sorrow was worse than any blade, because it reminded her of what she had lost, what she had chosen to bury, and what had now risen again. The silence between them was broken by a distant roar. From beyond the shattered walls came the sound of engines, heavy and merciless. The battlefield that had seemed empty was waking again. Enemies were coming, drawn by the echo of the spears trembling, and both of them knew the war was not finished. She rose slowly from her knees, wiping her tears with anger. Her heart was still breaking, but her body remembered what it meant to fight. The warrior queen inside her refused to die, even when her soul screamed in pain. She gripped the spear tighter, though it no longer felt like hers. Its glow was dim, as if waiting for his command, not hers. The man turned his gaze to the approaching shadows. "They are here for you," he said calmly. His voice carried no fear, only certainty. "They will not stop until you fall." She spat at the ground, rage rising in her chest. "Then let them come," she hissed. But inside, doubt clawed at her. Her power was slipping, her weapon was slipping, and now even survival seemed uncertain. The enemy came like a tide of steel, dark shapes with burning eyes, armored beasts with claws of fire. Soldiers who once bowed to her now marched to see her dead. Their weapons hummed with energy, their footsteps shook the earth. She had faced worse before, yet tonight everything felt heavier, because she knew her spear was no longer hers. The man stepped forward, placing himself at her side. She turned to him with fury. "I don't need you," she snapped, but her voice betrayed her weak, broken. He looked at her with quiet fire. "Maybe not," he said, "but the spear does." The glow of the weapon pulsed faintly in her hands, as if answering his words. Her breath caught, fear twisted inside her. She wanted to throw the weapon away, to deny it, but without it, she was nothing, and with it, she was trapped. The enemy charged, their cries shaking the ruins. She lifted the spear, ready to strike, but her arms trembled, her heart pounded. The weapon did not blaze as it once did. It resisted her, heavy and cold. For a moment, she thought it would fail her completely. Then the man's hand brushed the shaft of the spear, and it blazed alive, silver fire erupting into the night. She gasped, the weapon humming with a power she could no longer command alone. The man stood close, his presence steady as a wall. Together they faced the tide of steel, and for the first time since she had buried him, they stood as one. The first enemy lunged, claws aimed for her throat. She thrust the spear, but it was his voice, his will, that guided its strike. The blade cut through metal. The beast fell in sparks. Her heart raced, anger and fear clashing with the strange truth. She was fighting, but not alone. The weapon was his, and she was only carrying it. More came, endless waves of steel and fire. She spun. He whispered. The spear struck. Every motion was guided by something beyond her. Every victory was not hers, but theirs. And that truth tore at her pride. Yet without him, she would already be dead. Her enemies screamed as they fell. The battlefield burned with light. But inside her, another war raged. She hated him for returning. She hated the spear for betraying her. And she hated herself most of all, for she could not deny the bond that still tied them. Hours passed like moments. When the last enemy fell, silence returned, heavy and endless. She stood covered in blood and ash, her chest heaving. The spear still glowed, but she knew the fire was not hers. She dropped it to the ground, the sound echoing like thunder. Her eyes turned to him, burning with fury and sorrow. "Why are you here?" she demanded, her voice breaking. "Why rise from the grave to haunt me?" He looked at her, silent for a long moment. Then he spoke with a voice that carried more weight than the stars. "Because truth cannot stay buried," he said, "and neither can I." Her body froze, her soul shook. The words struck deeper than the battle, deeper than the wounds. Because she knew he was right. No matter how many enemies she killed, no matter how far she ran, the truth would always follow her. And tonight it had found her. The battlefield was quiet again, but the silence carried weight heavier than war. She stood with blood on her hands, her chest burning from the fight. Yet her eyes were locked on the man who should not exist. The ghost who fought beside her, the ghost who broke her pride, the ghost who whispered her forgotten name. The spear lay between them, glowing faintly like a living heart. It did not tremble now, it pulsed with steady light. But she knew it was no longer hers. Every strike in the battle had proved it. Every whisper of his voice had proved it. The weapon belonged to him, not her. Her voice was sharp, though cracked with hidden fear. "Why does it obey you?" she demanded. "Why does the spear tremble at your voice?" The man looked at her with eyes that seemed older than time. "Because it remembers the truth," he said. "The truth you buried along with me." Her breath caught, her chest heavy. "What truth?" she spat, though her heart already knew. The man stepped closer, his presence pulling her like gravity. "When I whispered your name," he said softly, "I did not call the warrior queen. I called the woman you once were." Her knees weakened, her heart cracked. No one in the galaxy dared speak that name. No one even remembered it. She had erased it herself, burned it from history. So how could he still hold it? How could he bring it back with only a whisper? "The spear is bound to truth," he continued. "It cannot serve lies. It cannot serve masks. It serves only what is real. And when I spoke your name, the true name, the one buried in your soul, the spear heard it. It remembered who you are and who I am." Her chest shook with rage and sorrow. "No," she whispered, her voice broken. "I buried you. I buried that name. I buried that life." He shook his head, his voice firm but filled with grief. "You cannot bury what is bound. The name binds you to me, and me to you." Her tears burned her eyes. The warrior queen inside her screamed to silence him, to raise the spear and pierce his chest. But the woman buried deep inside her wanted to fall into his arms. The conflict tore at her, breaking her in ways no war ever had. The spear pulsed again, light flickering across the ruins. In its glow, she saw visions, memories not her own, warriors long dead calling each other by names only they knew. The weapon did not care for crowns or titles. It cared for bonds, for truth, for names that carried souls. She staggered back, clutching her chest as if her heart would burst. "You should not exist," she cried. "You were mine. You died in my arms." The man stepped closer, his voice cutting through her fear. "And still you call me yours." Her lips trembled, her body shaking, because deep down, she knew he was right. Even in her rage, even in her denial, he was hers, and she was his. The bond had never broken. Not even death had undone it. The name was the chain. The name was the truth. And the spear, ancient and wise, could not ignore it. It trembled at his voice because it recognized the bond. It obeyed him because the bond was real. And she feared that soon, she would too. The man's eyes softened, though fire still burned in them. "You swore an oath to power," he said. "But before that, you swore something else." Her body froze, her soul screaming in silence. Because she remembered, long before empires, long before war, she had sworn herself to him. "I swore to protect you," she whispered, her voice breaking. Her hand shook, her chest burned. The memory returned like fire. The night she swore never to let him fall. The night she swore to fight by his side until death. And yet it was she who buried him. It was she who broke the vow. The man reached down, lifting the spear with ease. The weapon blazed in his hands, brighter than it ever had for her. The light was not cruel, it was alive. It was truth made fire. Her knees weakened, her pride shattered. For the first time, she saw what she feared most. The spear had never truly been hers. It had only waited for him. Her tears fell freely now. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Then what am I without it?" The man looked at her with sorrow. "You are still bound," he said. "Bound not to the spear, but to me." Her chest shook, her soul shattered. The name bound them. The vow bound them. No crown, no empire, no grave could undo it. And now the truth stood before her like a blade. She was not the queen she thought she was. She was the woman who had broken her oath, and the woman who could never escape the man she once loved. The spear blazed in his hands, brighter than 1,000 suns. Its light filled the ruins, turning shadows into fire. She staggered back, her heart breaking as she watched. The weapon that had crowned her, the weapon that had built her empire, now glowed for him alone. And she knew the truth was no longer avoidable. Her voice cracked like shattering glass. "Give it back," she cried, fury burning in her chest. "It is mine, it has always been mine." But the words felt hollow, fragile, like lies spoken in the wind. The man did not answer with anger. He answered with sorrow. "It was never yours," he said softly. "It was only waiting for me." Her knees trembled, her chest tightened. Every victory she had ever won felt like ash. Every battle, every crown, every oath, none of it was truly hers. The spear had been borrowed, not claimed, and now it stood with its rightful master. The battlefield groaned under the weight of silence. Even the broken stones seemed to lean toward him, as if the universe itself accepted the truth. Her hands shook, tears burned her eyes, but her pride screamed louder than her pain. She could not fall, not now, not before him. She drew a dagger from her side, her last weapon, the blade small but sharp. If she could not have the spear, she would end this with her own strength. Her voice broke as she shouted, "If the spear chooses you, then I will kill you with my own hands." The man looked at her, his eyes filled not with fear, but with sorrow. "You cannot," he said. She lunged, the dagger cutting the air. But before the blade reached him, the spear flared like lightning. Its power threw her back, knocking her to the ground. Her body ached, her pride shattered further. Even her last weapon was nothing before the truth. She gasped for air, her chest heaving. Why would fate not let her win? Why would the universe betray her? The man stepped closer, his voice soft but unshakable. "You must choose," he said. "Kill me and live as a lie, or accept me and live as truth." Her body froze, her soul tearing in two. All her life, she had chosen war. She had chosen strength, crowns, power, and fear. But now, before her stood the man she once buried, the man who whispered her name, the man bound to her by truth. And she could no longer hide. Her tears spilled freely, falling onto the broken stones. She hated him for living. She hated herself for breaking. But deeper than hate was something she could not bury, something she had tried to kill with her own hands. Love, it still lived. It still bound her. Her voice shook, a whisper lost in the wind. "I cannot kill you," she said. The man's eyes softened, his grip on the spear steady. "Then you accept the truth?" he whispered. Her heart burned, her pride shattered. But her silence was answer enough. The spear blazed one last time. Its light poured over them both. It no longer trembled. It no longer resisted. It accepted the bond. Not hers alone, not his alone, but theirs, bound by the name, bound by the oath, bound by the truth. She sank to her knees, her crown heavy, her soul broken. The warrior queen who had conquered galaxies had fallen. Not to armies, not to blades, but to truth. And the man she had buried now stood as her equal. Her fate no longer hers alone. Their fates bound forever. The ruins around them echoed with silence. The war outside would rage again. Enemies would come. Empires would fall. But nothing would ever undo what had happened here. He whispered her name again, soft as breath. The spear pulsed with light, and she wept, knowing nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same.